Mba'eshapa, estimados amigos. It's a true honor to join you, albeit virtually, for the launch of the U.S. Paraguay High-Level Working Group at this important strategic convergence event. I want to extend my warmest greetings to Foreign Minister Ramirez, Ambassador Leite, and all the distinguished participants joining today. A special thank you to Diego Area and the Global Americans for the kind invitation. As someone who spent 5 formative years of my life in Paraguay while my father served as the U.S. ambassador, I have a deep and personal appreciation for the warmth, strength, and spirit of the Paraguayan people. Paraguay holds a very special place in my heart, and I'm proud to see how our partnership has grown stronger over the years. Today, the United States and Paraguay stand together as strategic partners, working closely on a range of priorities. We're collaborating on defense, in counter-narcotics, and building infrastructure for communication and informations technology. Our economic ties are robust, and we're committed to increasing opportunities for U.S. investment. In fact, the U.S. is Paraguay's second largest foreign investor, and let's try to make that the first. We're also working together to bolster security cooperation, address organized crime, and confront the threat of narcotics and human trafficking and money laundering. Paraguay's leadership is standing up for fundamental freedoms and democracy, both in the region and around the world, and it sets an example for all of us. As we look to the future, we're committed to increasing opportunities for our militaries to train and plan together, coordinating regional efforts to combat illegal immigration, establishing direct flights between our countries, and resolving bureaucratic hurdles that American businesses sometimes face. I'm confident that this high-level working group will further strengthen the bonds between our countries. My heartfelt thanks to all of you for your dedication and partnership. I look forward to seeing the positive impact of our collaboration for years to come. Muchísimas gracias. Rojaihu, Paraguay.
Good morning and welcome to those who are connecting virtually and the special guests who are joining us here at the Embassy of Paraguay for this official launch of the U.S. Paraguay High-Level Working Group. A special thanks to Ambassador Gustavo Leite for hosting us, and the CAF, our partner, the Development Bank of Latin America and the Caribbean, for supporting this important initiative. As a former ambassador of Paraguay and Brazil, and well as a member of the board of directors for Global Americans and the co-chair of the U.S. Paraguay High-Level Working Group, I am particularly pleased for today's event with the launching of this initiative. And we're entitling this event as the Strategic Convergence U.S. Paraguay Partnership for a Shared Economic Future. The official launch of this high-level working group provides a unique opportunity, a platform to showcase the different phases of Paraguay. I lived there, I worked there, and I know the potentials are tremendous. I've been back and seen the growth. It's the fastest growing economy in the Western Hemisphere. So there are a lot of opportunities, and sometimes not well known. So I do believe that the high-level working group provides a platform to showcase a lot of these opportunities. And critical areas for us to work as U.S. Paraguay relations. This initiative will allow the private sector and the public sector to come together and to engage in concrete areas that can accelerate certain investment opportunities, for instance. And we're looking to attract more commercial engagements and establish a more robust investment climate. And so a lot has been done already, but this initiative is formally being launched today, and it convenes a lot of audiences. It has the collaboration of a number of experts, produced many reports. It will produce many reports and with recommendations and analysis and so forth. In areas a focus that both Paraguay and U.S. have determined that are of interest to both countries. So this high-level working group will focus on these different areas, and we hope that this will serve as inputs, contribute to strengthening these bilateral relations in the different economic and geopolitical areas. We are pleased today that we're going to have some interesting events. We'll have a fireside conversation between the Foreign Minister of Paraguay, Rubén Ramírez Lezcano, and the Deputy Assistant Secretary for the Andes and the Southern Cone, Frank Cartwright-Wieland from the Department of State. And I'm certain that this will be an insightful event. It will be moderated by Diego Aria, the President and CEO of Global Americans. This important launch will also include a discussion panel on Paraguay's economic outlook. It is in its sovereign rating perspective. This is another area that we will be focusing on. And it will be moderated by Tulio Vera, who is a board member of Global Americans and an expert in this area. He is also the co-chair of the high-level working group. And we will include the participation of Jessica Bedoya, the founder and the managing director of the Lara Fund, as well as Sebastian Lahai, a CEO of Abbeyfield Group, and Sheila Abed, the former Minister of Justice of Paraguay. I can assure you that you'll find these conversations of interest. It will serve as a lot of inputs for strengthening the U.S.-Paraguay relations. And so I'm very pleased that I can formally declare this as a milestone, a launch for the U.S. Paraguay High-Level Working Group. And I want to take a moment to thank everyone who's been participating and who's offered their time and expertise and contributed to this effort going forward. So thank you, and look forward to engaging you with everyone in the foreseeable future.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Ayalde, and welcome to everyone who is joining from across the Americas virtually. I also want to recognize those who came to the Paraguayan Embassy in Washington, D.C. for this important milestone for the bilateral relation between the U.S. and Paraguay. For those who prefer Spanish, you can have your subtitles live. Para aquellos que prefieren ver esta conversación en español, pueden simplemente ver los subtítulos en tiempo real. Today, we're officially launching the U.S. Paraguay Working Group, a group that will foster investment, nearshoring, and of course, democratic cooperation across the Americas, in partnership with the Development Bank of Latin America and the Caribbean, CAF. This initiative builds on Paraguay's trajectory, a nation that combines macroeconomic stability with democratic stability as well, and clean energy leadership to become a more reliable partner for the United States. We were having a conversation before this event about the gap that exists between the progress and advancements that Paraguay has been making during the last years, and the awareness in Washington, D.C., in New York, within the investment community and with policymakers. And this group marks a new era for U.S.-Paraguay relations. We are here to close the gap, the information gap. Through this group, we'll be convening key policymakers from U.S. and Paraguay. We'll be writing reports, we'll be writing op-eds, we'll be conducting briefings in Congress and different key forums. We'll be also providing analysis to, again, provide visibility to the amazing things that Paraguay is doing in the United States. This effort is part of Global Americans' approach to middle-income countries, looking at countries like Paraguay, Panama, the Dominican Republic, Costa Rica, and Ecuador as the most reliable partners in this new era of U.S. engagement towards the region. With that, I am honored to begin today's conversation with Foreign Minister of Paraguay, Rubén Ramírez Lezcano, and Deputy Assistant Secretary, Frank Wieland, whose leadership and experience are central to understanding the nature of the relationship, but overall, to understand the big opportunities that lie ahead. I would like to start with you, Minister Ramirez. Paraguay has been consistently promoting a pro-investment foreign policy for the last years. Could you please lay out for the public what are the key opportunities you see in the bilateral relation moving forward?
Well, first of all, thank you for Global Americans, CAF, our ambassador here in Washington, D.C., the president of the Congress of Paraguay, the president of the Foreign Affairs Committee of the Senate, and senators that are coming. I looking several friends coming here this morning. I am so happy to meet you again to discuss about Paraguay. The answer is we are working hard bilaterally with the United States. We have several priorities in the same level. First of all, the global tensions. You know, the world is changing, and the challenge that we share is based on principles: democracy, human rights, freedom, state of rule, or rule state. I think that one of the most important partners of the United States in South America is Paraguay. Why? Not only for its location in the center, in the heart of South America, but as well because Paraguay is the only country that has diplomatic relations with Taiwan. Paraguay is supporting strongly the fight against the terrorism, and also because Paraguay is a very close ally of Israel. And that means that we are sharing the challenge with the United States about the global stability, but as well, we feel alone. And what is the reason to promote Paraguay and to create the condition and build the strong relation with the United States? Because as you can see in the votes in the United Nations about the resolution presented by several countries, we are alone as well. In the last week, we were only U.S., Israel, and Paraguay voting about resolution that train to change the rule of law, to change the division against the fight against the terrorism. And well, we share also the issue of economic growth and stability. Paraguay is one of the most stable country in South America because we have had during the last 20 years a very important macroeconomic stability, building predictability, building stability, and as well as the discipline on the fiscal policies. That means that Paraguay is growing this year close to 6% of the GDP, and an average of 5% in the last 3 years, continuously. That means every year we have to improve several challenges to grow. The other issue, the environmental affairs, and looking not on the protectionism, in the side of the protectionism, but looking of the responsibility. Paraguay have at least 8,000 million of hectares of forest, and today we are getting foreign investment on green energy, on paperwork. We are working hard to allow foreign investment, and especially working with the United States. Carl, thank you very much for coming here this morning. We appreciate very much the sign of the Department of State because we are sharing always our bilateral agenda, working hard with them and to promote investment in areas of energy, investment on area of AI, investment on area of generation of energy, and dealing with energy transition, dealing with security, the fight against the transnational organization that we have, not only in our region, but around the world. That is a challenge quite important. We are working on security and safety, on migration. We are working as well on the area of military cooperation. And, well, we are working on trade as well. Because Paraguay, since its position supporting Taiwan, we don't have up to now the market access to China. And that is the reason why we are very based on our principle. And the diversification of market access is very important issue. Up to now, we improved 87 countries in which we have market access. Basis in the Southeast of Asia, ASEAN, the Indo-Pacific countries. We are working hard in the Gulf countries, UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, and in Europe, we hope to sign the agreement next December 20th if finally the European countries agreed on this. We are working in Africa. I have been recently in Morocco. That is important open door to the African countries in which we are working hard. And as well in Mercosur. Paraguay will share since next December, Mercosur again for 6 months. Now Brazil is ending its presidency. And we are very close to negotiate with Canada, with UAE. We are finalizing now our negotiation. Next 6 months, we will sign those agreements. We are starting negotiation with India. The Deputy Foreign Minister of Foreign Affairs have been in Paraguay of India this last week. And we are very close to start the second step of our trade relation through FTA. We are negotiating with South Korea, Japan. Japan is a strategic ally of Paraguay as well. And that represents a huge of opportunity. But United States is our principal partner. And we are working hard with the United States, with Taiwan and Paraguay, the triangle cooperation. For example, on cybersecurity, that is quite important. We are working in AI. We are working to attract investment on mining. Paraguay produce food, food security issue that is quite important also in the international agenda. Paraguay is producing food. Being 6.5 million inhabitants, we produce food for 100 million inhabitants in the world. And is the only country that have today available 40,000 million hectares to produce food. And the future, the challenge for the future is food, the access to the food. Always we discuss in Mercosur that in the next years will be the Mercosur country that is the only space available to produce real natural food for the world. We will create the quota to sell our products to the world. And that with humility, that represents a challenge and a huge responsibility for us as well. We are working very close with the United States on not only on insecurity, on trade, we are discussing with USTR also, but we are working to create the best condition for our institutional strength. Paraguay, since the beginning of the government of President Santiago Peña, decides to access to the OECD. Mm-hmm. That represents not only a huge opportunity being part of this organization, but creating the best practices. We are working with the United States with this cooperation. We have a country program. We met last week, a ministerial meeting OECD in Asunción, in Paraguay. But that represents that we have the opportunity, thanks to those congressmen and senators, to change our structural public policies and create the best conditions, the best practices. Since President Santiago Peña has been appointed in August 23, he and his team will work very close with the Congress to create the laws, at least 120 leyes más o menos, ¿no? 120 laws approved by the Congress, because the discussion on the executive and the Congress is quite close. And that gives us the opportunity to make the change that the country needs today. I will stop by there. I think that there are many, many issues in which we can discuss biosecurity issues. Since the COVID-19, we have several challenges, and we have to discuss. Paraguay is building now 5 big hospitals to create the best condition on health policy, on education. We are working on scholarships. Paraguay have at least 6,500 people studying at the Ivy League University, and the one only condition, the acceptance of the university. And that is a very, very interesting opportunity to create an intellectual mastery. But as well, we need to create best conditions in education, health, and security.
Thank you, Minister. So, geostrategic location, strategic alignment. Deputy Assistant Secretary Weber, how your thoughts on how the U.S. can leverage those components to continue promoting energy security, democratic stability within the southern corner?
Sure. Let me just start by echoing my friend here, Foreign Minister Ramirez, and thanking everyone for the invitation to be here. I think it's very important for the State Department to be represented at an event like this, because I do think we've entered a new era in the relationship. So I want to thank my colleagues in the Paraguayan Senate, who I had the opportunity to meet with last week, as well as Ambassador Leite, former Ambassador Ayalde, Chairwoman Ross Leitonen, everyone else. It's a great honor to be here. Frankly, I feel a little unqualified, but I'll do my best. So I was trying to think in preparing for today's event, what is it about Paraguay? Because let me tell you, at the State Department, hardly a day goes by where Paraguay does not come up, either from the Secretary himself, or the Deputy Secretary, or the Senior Bureau Official of the Bureau of Western Hemisphere Affairs, or the White House. I mean, Paraguay is the talk of the town, and I mean that sincerely. But what is it? I was trying to think to myself, it's not that Paraguay is the United States' chief geopolitical competitor. That would obviously be China. It's not that Paraguay is threatening the NATO alliance. Obviously, that would be Russia. It's not that Paraguay is the economic juggernaut of South America, not yet, at least. That would be Brazil. So what is it about Paraguay? Why is Paraguay so hot right now? Why is everyone talking about it? And I think it might sound a little cheesy, but I think that under this administration, there is a real sense that Paraguay is a friend that we can trust, that we can be candid with, in ways that we cannot be with other countries in the region. And most importantly, it is a friend that has our back across the board. And I think that under this administration, there is a desire to be honest, to be realist when it comes to foreign relations, talk honestly when you have a problem. Let's just, bring it up and address it rather than sort of brush it under the rug. And, whether or not we have a historic relationship with the country no longer matters as much. It's, what are you doing right now? And are you aligned with us or not? And Paraguay has proven over the last 10, 11 months of this administration that they want to be a friend to the United States. And I think that is now being reciprocated here in Washington, because we see not only, as my friend said, that we're aligned when it comes to principles, and there's that ideological affinity. We feel like we don't have to be bashful or embarrassed about our conservative principles when it comes to supporting democracy, human rights, whether it's immigration policy or our stance towards China or what have you. We can tell Paraguay what we think, and they tend to agree, which is great. But anyway, that's sort of the greater context, I guess, of why I think currently folks at the department are very enthusiastic and bullish when it comes to Paraguay. But when it comes to your question, what opportunities do I see? I mean, the possibilities are endless. I think that American businesses are increasingly interested and starting to fly down there to meet with President Peña. I was just thinking to myself, I've seen President Peña more probably than I've seen some of my best friends over the last 18 months. I've been down in Asunción twice in the last 18 months, which is more than I've been to, I think, any other foreign country while I've been in the job. So that just shows you sort of the enthusiasm that exists. But no, when it comes to Taiwan, that's a really important relationship right now. We are very worried about some of the inroads that China has made in Paraguay. Again, which brings up the candor and honesty that's so key to the relationship. We can speak openly with Foreign Minister Ramirez and the President about our concerns when it comes to China. We can have those hard conversations. We are very grateful for the support for Taiwan that Paraguay has shown. We are grateful for the stands that they've taken at the United Nations recently when it comes to countries like Cuba, for example, and difficult votes that have to be taken. When it comes to American business interests, as I said, some CEOs are starting to fly down there. Another thing that we're trying to do to facilitate those business opportunities is get a direct flight from the United States to Asunción. And for all the airlines who may be listening right now, we are very disappointed in some of the conversations that have been had so far with American, but we are going to move forward. We're going to continue those conversations with American, with United, with Delta, and I feel confident that we're going to get that flight established sooner rather than later. So let me just stop there and turn it back over to you.
One thing that we forgot is about the next World Championship. The next December 5th will be the selection of the teams to run here, but United States will host the FIFA World Championship, and Paraguay the next 2030. That means we are sharing challenge as well in this issue. But Paraguay, after 16 years, were qualified for this competition. We are so happy about that.
Hopefully by then we'll have
we need the direct flight. Yes, that is an opportunity also.
Absolutely.
Thank you both. As Waylon mentioned, China, great power competition, and as we all know, we are going through challenging and disruptive times. Mm-hmm. The U.S. decoupling from China, nearshoring opportunities. So I want to get your ideas in what concrete steps can Paraguay take to kind of capitalize on that strategic realignment and economic realignment of supply chain within the Americas.
First of all, we are sharing. Paraguay never have had an ideological foreign policy. We have our foreign policy is based on principles. And China, we recognize, is a very important country. It's a very big player in the world. But since our point of view, China will ever need food. And the only way that we have trade with China is exporting raw materials. Up to now, no country can compete with China because they did not accomplish up to date the rules. The cost of production of China is very cheap because they did not respect the rule of law, did not respect or don't respect the human rights, and they export the products with add value, like the car industries and others. That means up to date, we have no diplomatic relation with China, but is the number first provider of Paraguay. We have a deficit of 3 billion per year on trade with China. That is the first opportunity to the American company because our neighbors, Brazil, have 100 billion of deficit. And Argentina is close for 50 billions of deficit on trade. Well, that we are establishing very close partnership with the Brazilian companies because the competitiveness that they don't can arrive to compete with the Chinese products, they are establishing in Paraguay. For us, Brazil is our China. They have huge market. We have in Mercosur 400 million people consuming, and we are inviting to the American companies to share those opportunities. And at the same time, Paraguay is the only country that produces renewable and clean energy from hydro. That represents huge opportunity for data center companies. We have here our friend from Tigo company, and coming from Miami. I thank you so much, Kim, for coming here. Really, we are very close to the United States company to establish those kind of development that we need to create for Mercosur, not only for Paraguay. You have to think about not only in Paraguay market, you have to think in Mercosur market and in South American market because we have several preferences, better than Mercosur country, for example, with Chile, with Mexico, with Colombia, and Ecuador.
Thank you, Minister. Last question, maybe the most important one. That's Wayland. What do you think are what we can do as a high-level working group and global Americans working with governments and private sector to accelerate those travels from U.S. CEOs to Paraguay to facilitate that dialogue? What else can we do?
I will answer your question, and then I wanted to echo some things about China because I think they're very important. What can you all do? Well, I think Ambassador Leite said it best. I mean, first of all, just my sense is that a lot of people, unfortunately, just don't know about Paraguay. They don't know that it's such a wonderful place. They don't know that there are opportunities down there. They don't know about the macroeconomic stability, the fiscal discipline. I mean, it's just a relative unknown. When people think South America, they think Brazil, they think Argentina. But Paraguay deserves to be at the top of the list with those other countries. And I think you all spreading the word, introducing people to the business opportunities that exist, introducing CEOs to how to get down there, who the ministers are of the relevant agencies, et cetera, is all vitally important. And events like this are part of that. So I appreciate you for convening us. But just quickly back to the China conversation, I think that I would point to a few steps that Paraguay is taking that are very important that perhaps not everyone knows about. The first is they issued a tender for trusted vendors in the IT sector, which is important because it means that the Huawei's of the world will be kept out of Paraguay. And so we've been following that issue very closely. Look forward to hearing sort of who's bidding on that and how it is proceeding. I'd also point to some developments in the infrastructure realm. I know DFC here in the United States, we have some DFC colleagues here today. They're very eager to become more involved in Paraguay. And at a time when the Hidrovia region is being developed so rapidly and that in some ways Brazil and Argentina are out ahead of Paraguay, it's very important to include DFC and others in that conversation. I know that, for example, in the Paraguayan Congress. There's a memorandum of understanding with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers that we're very eager to get ratified so that some of that development can continue to happen.
Who will moderate the next panel. Tulio Vera is board member of Global Americans, and he served as portfolio manager and strategist for emerging markets and working global finance. He combines a deep understanding of investment flows, sovereign risk, and regional political dynamics, making him a key voice at the intersection of business, policy, and Latin America development. Tulio, the floor is yours.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Global Americans panel discussion on Paraguay on the economic and institutional outlook. My name is Tulio Vera. I'm a board member of Global Americans, and I chair the International Advisory Council for Global Americans. I will be the moderator for today. Before I introduce our esteemed panelists for today, let me set the stage in terms of what we're going to discuss, the structure, the objectives. And also, I'm going to mention briefly my background to start. I'm an economist by training. I spent over 25 years on Wall Street, specializing in emerging markets. Throughout my career, I built and ran emerging market teams for various investment banks, and I was a portfolio manager at several hedge funds, and also finally, my last job before retiring was as the chief investment strategist for the Latin American private bank at JP Morgan. That's me. I'll introduce the other panelists in a minute. The panel, or the idea of this panel, draws on the findings of a report that we will soon be releasing. The report is entitled Paraguay's Path to Full Investment Grade, Bridging the Perception Gap. The paper outlines Paraguay's economic trajectory, the institutional progress made in recent years, and the remaining challenges that the country still faces in order to become a full investment grade country. Remember that only one of the major rating agencies has upgraded Paraguay to an investment grade status. That's Moody's last year. So hopefully, if the other ones come in, the idea is ideally that Paraguay could enter a more virtuous economic and political cycle, something that often seems to elude Latin American countries, unfortunately. That said, many of us have been looking at Paraguay in the last few years from abroad. We're impressed with the way the country's macroeconomic growth agenda has evolved, with the fiscal prudence that has been instilled by policymakers, and in terms of the structural reform agenda over recent years, not just during the last couple of years of Santiago Peña, but also even before that. We've been somewhat frustrated, I would say, with the disconnect that exists out there between what I would call progress, both institutionally and economically, that the country has made on the one hand, and then the perception that the country still lags significantly. This perception maybe is just mostly overseas, but we call it in the paper, we call it the perception gap. One other note before I lay out the topics, having been involved in Latin America for pretty much my whole professional career. I've had for better or for worse, I've had a front seat to many of the boom and bust cycles in the region, the frustrated aspirations that are typically the bane of the region's existence. I'm conscious that at the moment there are not that many great country stories in Latin America. And in fact, in the paper, we discuss how the sovereign credit quality as a whole for the region has been deteriorating over the last 10 years, or more or less 10 years. Countries such as Brazil and Colombia, which had reached investment grade, lost it in the last 10 years for a variety of reasons. So I think this is why the Paraguay story is so impressive, both on a standalone and on a relative basis to the rest of the region. There simply are not that many bright, shining stories out there anymore. And at least from our vantage point, we view Paraguay as bucking that trend in the region. So setting the stage, three big topics that we cover in the paper and which we're going to discuss today. One is the growth story. It's an impressive growth story, especially in the recent years, 4% roughly, this year close to 5%. But the country is in need of economic diversification. It needs to reduce its overexposure to climate, to agricultural primary markets, and commodity shocks. So that's one point. The second point, the fiscal story, or the fiscal debt story, which is a sound story, but is still in need of more consolidation, implementation of the fiscal responsibility law, revenue mobilization. Country collects fairly little in terms of taxes, needs to widen that base, etc. And the third one is the less my specialty, but the institutional story. A fair amount of progress has happened in terms of the institutional governance fronts, but there's still a lot of work to be done. More reforms need to chip away at the many years of lack of progress on that front. So we will touch on those three main aspects and then other things that come up, the growth, the fiscal, and the institutional story. So let me introduce the panelists for today. Sheila Abad is a former Minister of Justice for the Republic of Paraguay. She's held numerous distinguished positions, specializing in climate and environmental law and civil society issues. Welcome, Sheila. Sebastián Lahaye is the CEO of Abbeyfield Group in Paraguay, an international investment group that focuses on Latin America, specializes in advisory and private equity investments within the financial services and agro-industrial industries. Welcome, Sebastián. And then Jessica Bedoya, founder and managing partner of the LATA Fund in Miami, managing partner of the Latin American Real Asset Opportunity Fund. Lara was previously at the Inter-American Development Bank and at the U.S. International Development Finance Corporation, the DFC. Welcome, Jessica. Opening round on economic fundamentals and diversification. In the first round, I'm going to throw a question at each of you individually, but I would encourage everyone to feel free to comment about any of the questions if you feel you add value to it or just want to elaborate further. So the first one is for Sebastián. I want to hear more the banker's perspective here. How do you think about the country's current macro standing from a banking or banker's perspective? What do you think still needs to happen in the country? What is your perception of the balance of where the country is, and perhaps in particular, how do you interpret this issue of the economic or sectoral concentration, particularly the dependence on agriculture and hydroelectricity? I know it's a mouthful of questions, but the floor is yours, Sebastián.
That's all right. Thank you, Tulio. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to talk about Paraguay outside of Paraguay. It's an interesting time, I think, to talk about the economic situation in Paraguay, because I think 2025 is one of those pivotal transformation year for Paraguay. I think when we talk about the economic concentration, we really need to make the separation between two factors. Number one, GDP. What does the country do on a daily basis? And exports. How does it make its money outside? If you look at pure GDP, agriculture is not even 10%. If I sum agriculture, cattle, and even agro-industrial transformation, I still don't get to 50%. So from a GDP perspective, what does the country do on a daily basis? It's no longer an agricultural country. It's an industrial and a service country. If you sum up industrial and service, you're over 50% of GDP. Now, how does the country make its money outside? Yes, it's still very much dependent on agricultural exports, even though that share every year is a little bit smaller than the year before, which is a reflection of the diversification of the GDP. The more you're industrializing the country, the more the industrial part is going to grow within your export shares. So I think that factor is important because people think of Paraguay as an agricultural country in terms of its own GDP, and that's no longer the case. And that is thanks to the diversification of the economy. It started with the maquila in the late 2000, early 2010s, with the concept of low qualification, low labor intensive qualification, but knowledge and employment, which is really what the Paraguay economy needs, is employment, and employment that matches the level of education. And you're seeing that slowly but surely, that level of requirement is going up. Today, we need a lot more engineers than we needed 10 years ago. And the reason I was saying we're at an inflection point is that to a certain extent, the realization of the bounty of renewable, seemingly limitless hydro energy or hydroelectricity have triggered an analysis of how bountiless and how limitless is it. And the reality is it's not. And it's not because we're starting to use it. We used to sell 95% of our share of Itaipu, and slowly but surely we're going to end up using 100% of our 50%. And that is because we're clearly developing industrial conglomerates that are using more and more energy. We also have fallen victim, in my opinion, to the trend of crypto mining. Crypto mining probably today uses way more than officially is said. I estimate it as shy of 2 turbines of Itaipu today. We're at between 1.3 and 1.5 gigawatts of usage for crypto. The good news is that all the electricity contracts for crypto expires in 2027, and I don't expect those to be renewed. But the point is, it's not limitless. And I think that conversation about where is the energy going to come from has triggered the development of new areas. And it's a domino effect. If you need to produce energy from other sources, and you can have more energy, most likely it will be renewable or sustainable. And therefore, you can bring more electro-intensive industries in the country. So when we look at where is Paraguay going to go going forward in terms of its next stage of development, we see 3 sectors. Number one, everything that's related to energy. We have the prospects of small and medium-sized mini dams inside Paraguay. There's about 20 to 25 projects that have been identified as viable. And then you've got solar. Paraguay clearly is a candidate for a massive solar push. If you're going to develop extensively those new sources of energy, then you also can attract electro-intensive industries. And we're seeing a big push for what people call green hydrogen, but really is what production can I do, which is electro-intensive, and because the electricity is from renewable sources, therefore can come with a green certificate. So it could be hydrogen, but really today, the most viable option is fertilizers. So any kind of fertilizer that is produced through electrolysis, which is by definition electro-intensive, is clearly in the spotlight today. There is one big project that is going to start construction in the first quarter of next year. And there's another one, which is 3 times the size, that is still in development, but will come to fruition when we've got the solar panel projects going live. So anything electro-intensive that comes with energy. And the third package would be anything around forestation. Paraguay, we always joke about the fact that they discovered that you could plant trees as opposed to, do agro-intensive or cattle ranching, and that you can do a lot of things with the trees. And coincidentally, Paraguay is probably the place on earth where the trees grow the fastest. You can do a harvest in 7 years or less, which is even faster than southern Brazil. And with trees, you really have also a waterfall trickle down effect inside the economy, because you've got everything before the tree, where it comes anything agro-industrial, the plantinas, the baby trees, and anything that goes with the upstream, and then everything that goes from the harvest to what do you do with the trees. And there's a huge potential between pulp to SAF, new fuels, renewable fuels, and anything in between that you can do with woods. So we see those 3 sectors as being key for the next phase of the development of the country.
Okay, thank you. I want to come back to some of these questions, but let me, in the interest of keeping the flow, let me turn to Jessica. And I want to see if I can get from you more the foreign investor perspective. So the question here would be, given your experience in emerging markets, what signals do you get, or how do you differentiate Paraguay's macroeconomic story from that of the other regional peers in Latin America? How do you assess Paraguay? Are you participating in the country, and if not, why not? What would you consider in order to, say, invest there? How do you think about this?
Great, thank you for the question. Paraguay for us, for Lera Fund, is a priority market. Actually, I was just traveling there and held a lot of productive meetings in the country to talk about a little bit about the story behind why my investment fund is interested in investing in Paraguay, but also to really get the ground truth on the investment climate, on why not more people are talking about foreign investment opportunities in Paraguay, and maybe what we can do to really help shape and build that story that I think, at the outset in your introduction, you said a few important points that really resonated, which is really, why is no one going to Paraguay? If they're doing all the right things and all of the macroeconomic flags that are being, markers that are being planted are not being observed well enough, or in a way that's appealing for investors. I think I took away two key things from my travels recently there. The first is that I think that Paraguay, not unlike most of its neighbors in the region, is trying to find a way to sell itself to foreign investors. I think that a lot of markets actually in the Western Hemisphere really struggle with positioning themselves, because there's the political rhetoric at one end of the spectrum, where you have governments and leaders and presidents, and I've seen many of them in my various capacities, from the White House to the IDB to the DFC, arrive in Washington, make a speech, talk about the focus on foreign investment, which is great. And then you have the reality, which is the private sector, how it moves capital, how local capital markets behave. And you would know this, Tulio, obviously firsthand as well. And where there's a gap of capital, where there could be a niche opportunity for foreign investors to come in and play a value add role. And I think that in that spectrum of, political rhetoric and investment reality is where I exist right now, as an investor, trying to bridge that, trying to fill that space, trying to understand the space and fill it, and where we can be a value add as an investor. And I think Paraguay is a part of that. I wouldn't want to call it a problem set, but I think is part of that ecosystem where you need to really bridge the divide between reality and rhetoric to really be increasing your curb appeal, frankly, to investors, right? Because I think a lot of what's happening is, I think a lot of 30,000 foot discussions happen about investment opportunities in Paraguay. We are open for business. But when the rubber meets the road, is investment arriving? Are investors willing to bandwagon and bring in fresh capital? We haven't seen that yet, which is why we're having this conversation today. So I am focused on Paraguay for two key reasons. One, we think it is really a quiet powerhouse in terms of investment opportunity. I think that what we see is a curb appeal that other investors are going to be a little late to the game. And that really excites me, because it means we could be first movers or first among new movers in the market, to be complementary to existing investors, to be complementary to the capital markets, to be complementary to the local banks, not to really be predatory in that sense of the word that sometimes U.S. or other foreign investors are perceived as more predatory and exploitative. We at Lera Fund don't have that philosophy in terms of investment. And in fact, we want to be complementary to local partners and sponsors. So that's number one. And number two, I think that as we're talking about Paraguay's growth going forward, I think a key factor there is the amicability of the environment, right? So as an investor, how friendly are my partners? How friendly are the local players? How open are they really? Because I think the government has done all the right things. I think that under the current administration, they have made the right moves in terms of improving investor climate. They have, I learned of a new government program that increases tax incentives, which again generates that curb appeal, for foreign investors who want to be able to put their money in and be able to take it out. Those types of incentive structures and tax benefits, facilitating permits, facilitating the regulatory environment, all of those are factors that feed into that curb appeal. But I think by and large, for us, as a private investor looking to invest with other private investors, more now, possibly later, more with the government and on the public side, we really want to know how open those local players are to allowing the presence of new actors and new stakeholders. I think that Paraguay, in comparison to its other neighbors, has a really great opportunity, because you have entrenched economic interests in Paraguay, but you also have an aperture that Paraguay can bring a whole lot more to not only the regional market, but to global markets. And you have I absolutely sensed a real openness to having new players on the field. And I think that if we can capitalize on that, my investment fund, us as investors, but we, the community here, talking about Paraguay, hoping that we can help shape that narrative so we can promote the real story behind the powerhouse that is Paraguay as an investment opportunity. I think that showing some good early wins on that openness would be beneficial, right? So for me, as an investor, I would love to be able to plug in with the local groups, the local grupos empresariales, the local families, the local banks, to identify those really good deals that can showcase the ease with which foreign investors can really come in. And I want to just stipulate one final point. I don't want to take up too much time, but I think that there's often a mistake for investors that are working in this emerging market in particular, which is we want to showcase that we can work in Latin America by identifying the biggest deal, the largest ticket, saying we're going to deploy this big ticket, and then hope for the best. And I think, as you said, you've had the front seat to the booms and busts. I think I've seen a lot of the booms and busts of institutional investors and larger investors who think that they can play that way in Latin America, when the reality is that's not where the win is. That's a headline win, but it's not an execution win. And I have a fiduciary responsibility to my investors to execute projects and to exit successfully. And I think that right now is the time to go into Paraguay the right way, patiently, working with the right partners to design the right exits. And I think that across Latin America, that's part of what I've been frankly saying to a lot of players with whom I meet across the region, which is I am not interested in those big tickets. I'm interested in execution and increasing my execution rate and decreasing my execution risk. So how do I do that? And that's by targeting the right size deals in the right markets and with the right partners. So all in all, I really do believe that Paraguay for us is really a hidden gem in the region. I think that you're right. There are a lot of other markets that I think primarily called a lot of attention early on. I think they're going through some geopolitical headwinds that they need to overcome. And we'll see in the year to come what happens to those markets. But in the meantime, I think now is an opportunity for Paraguay to really pick up where these other countries are leaving off and generate the buzz that it should, because it's doing all of the right things.
Great. Thank you, Jessica. Sheila, turning a little bit more to the, I guess, the institutional perspective, and maybe since you're giving your expertise in climate issues, I'd like to throw a similar question that I did to Sebastian in terms of I guess he would call it more the perceived sectoral concentration, but more on the export side being still agriculturally dependent for, I guess, generation of foreign exchange and whatnot. But just overall, what does the investment grade rating mean from a domestic institutional point of view, if anything, and in particular in terms of rule of law and governability challenges that the country faces. If you could comment on that, I think it would be great. And feel free to comment on what the other speakers have said too, and provide your own view.
Okay, thank you, Tulio, and the other participants for having me. I can't separate myself for having been the Minister of Justice, so I would like to start saying that what we need as country is to have projects to attract investors with bankable, predictable, and transparent projects. And this is something we have to work on. We have to ensure legal protection for foreign investment, clearly with clear registry of property, for example. We have been struggling with that. I think now we are having a new institution in which we can have more certainty and work with that, with a consistent enforcement, access to impartial arbitration in case any problem arise. We have some foundational rules of the game that are important, like we allow repatriation, and we have provide tax incentives to reinforce predictability. But we still need, for example, to establish some instruments for de-risking. There are a lot of instruments, and to establish guarantees because of the things that Jessica and Sebastian has mentioned before. I think that there are important things in which we are working now, but we have to reassure that, for example, the implementation of the new public-private partnership law increases with, for example, standardized contract templates that we need. We have to require fiscal affordability analysis and public disclosure of contingent liabilities, like Jessica mentioned before. And I also think a lot about some of the recommendations that the multilateral banks have given us, like, for example, creating a project preparation facility with a multi-year pipeline with project sponsorable things that with feasibility, environmental, social, and procurement documents ready, because as Jessica said, we have to conduct the investors to what is possible there, what is feasible, and also to work a lot in the permitting processes. The permitting processes can be very tricky here. And what she was saying, that we have to walk the talk, and sometimes the politician said, well, this is working very well, but in the ground, this is not very accurate. It's not. So we have to work on that. And also I will say, Sebastian told about the energy policies. We have to work a little bit more on that. We have this huge hydropower. It's true that it's a major anchor for manufacturing, but we need predictable pricing. This is important. And the export arrangements, and also work on these other tariff adjustments that the government are saying that they're going to put in place, and clarify rules for power export and private offtake, especially with this. We need this clear grid access. We need to energy intensive manufacturing lead to how we're going to work with this. I remember many years ago, the government attracted one steel company, and then when they brought the initiative here, we were not ready to have them. So this is something we have to work also. And the solar and EV supply chains that we are now starting to work on that. And also to promote, and this is important because we are doing that, but this is very linked with energy, to promote these maquila and free trade zones with some energy price commitments. The other thing I am a little worried about is that we need to attach clawbacks in the contracts and some, for example, performance milestones to give the investors some certain opportunities or holiday taxes, because this is important. We need to prefer refundable research and development credits, because we need to put in place a lot of human resources here. Although it's true we were working on services, the truth is that we're still importing CEOs and some kind of the upper jobs, because we need more investment on training and on having the social capital ready to have
Education.
these investments here. And also, I will say, we need to publish what are the opportunities on the public and private partnership, but those that are truly going to work and comply with the commitments, because many of the people that work in certain areas and get involved with projects with the government, sometimes they don't receive timely the disbursements, and this make a big gap. I'm sure Sebastian knows that it's very difficult for some areas to work, to concentrate and have and reassure that they're going to have the money. And so they have to be very resilient companies to work and to have the back to sustain this trouble in having the money delivered to them. And what investors want, I think the investors want a stack of, for example, if we can do, I always read on papers on countries, for example, on East Europe, that they will give them to attract investors a stack of land, power, logistic, workforce, and custom facilitation. I think those are areas in which the country can work to improve the attraction for investors. And for example, they're working on simplifying customs and bonded warehousing, but there's a lot to go in these cases. Now I'm talking about like more general things. Then I want to come back with, for example, rule of law and combating corruption. That those are things very important for my country also.
Okay.
Can I make a comment just to add
Yeah,
really
go ahead,
quickly
Jessica.
to what Sheila was saying on the pipeline? I think, I have heard from everywhere and everyone about the need to generate pipeline. And I saw a lot of this when I worked at the DFC. And I think that project feasibility, bankable projects is real. I think investors don't want to come in and do a lot of the work. They want to come in and see what's ready, right? I think I'm a little different in that I know that it takes work and you have to pluck some hairs off every deal and transaction. But I think not everyone thinks, has our philosophy and approach to the region. The one cautionary tale that I would share is that as an investor, as there's space between political rhetoric and reality for investment purposes, I think there's also a difference between developing a pipeline to show that there is an opportunity and then developing targeting that pipeline to a specific audience. I've seen a lot of pipelines that are $4 to $6 to $10 billion. So again, those huge, humongous ticket sizes. But then the question is, how realistic is any of this, right? How realistic is it you're going to get a few institutional investors locked into an SPV for $4 billion? So, I've also been sharing my experience as an investor that I really would love to see pipelines that maybe are not to that scale and have everyone feel comfortable with that, because then suddenly the markets seem much more realistic for investors. It seems a lot less riskier for an investor to come in if they're seeing a pipeline that looks executable. And so, I wanted to just share that because I've seen it from every perspective, from policymaking to at the IDB, now as a private investor. And I repeat myself all the time that I would love to see those realistic $500 million pipelines, right? That, I think it's still pretty sizable for a market like Paraguay, right? It would be huge. But, a realistic pipeline with those types of deals that would be able to draw that curb appeal again to investors like myself, because then I can easily take that to other investors that might want to operate, but maybe don't believe that a $2 billion deal is really going to get off the ground.
Thank you.
Okay, that's good. I want to come back to the rule of law and the corruption issues, Shayla, but let me touch on a couple other things before we get to that. Perhaps talk a little bit about maybe the fiscal and local capital markets, because when we were working on this project, obviously the fiscal is a key signal to foreign investors, to local investors, that the country is doing the right things. Fiscal rectitude is generally appreciated by everybody. But there's always this issue when I compare Paraguay to, say, a country like Chile, for example, that the domestic capital markets are very shallow. They're undeveloped. And how much, maybe this is a question for anyone who wants to take it, maybe Sebastian or whoever. How much do you think that hinders investment into the country? How does that fit, like domestic capital markets and also the fiscal, in your appraisal of where Paraguay is in the whole development continuum, if you will? Who wants to take that?
I'll just give my 2 cents on that. I mean, there is no capital market in Paraguay, and the biggest challenge here is to find capital. Projects, they are, and like Jessica is saying, there are projects from 5 million all the way to 5 billion. Why? Because we're starting from such a low point that really everywhere you look, there is an opportunity. Either it hasn't been done in Paraguay, or it's been done somewhere else and you can do it better in Paraguay. So I think the issue is, how do you fund all these projects? And that's the challenge that we're having, because 95% of the economy is family owned. So if the family doesn't have the backbone or even the interest to go into specific projects, then it just doesn't happen. So we're very dependent, and not just for new projects, but also as financial institutions. There is no long-term deposits in Paraguay. Even pension funds don't leave their money for more than 5 years. So obviously, how do you develop a country with no long-term funding? So this is the biggest challenge, number one challenge. And like Jessica says, it's the opportunity to be first-time movers, because literally there is nobody. There's only one fund in Paraguay, and all it does is plant trees. So there is an opportunity for people who have, a bit of a longer vision in a non-ideological, stable country, to say, okay, this is a place where I can find my 25 million project, my 100 million project, or my $1 billion project. But I always say it's a 22-year-old country from an institutional perspective. So if we're going to sit down between Paraguayans and tropicalized Paraguayans, or guests of the country, we're going to make a very, very long list of all the things that don't work. The way I look at it is, are we a little bit better today than we were yesterday? And I have no doubt that we're on the path of something that's better. Should we be on a 4-lane highway that thick of very smooth pool table asphalt? Absolutely. But this is Paraguay, and we're on the little mountain road with potholes and rocks, and sometimes we get close to the ravine, but then we all make a joint decision that, well, we need to go back on the middle of the road. So when it comes to corruption, when it comes to all these issues, there is, again, perception and reality. There's no more corruption than there is in Brazil, and I would argue that there's actually less. There's definitely less red tape. And as a foreign investor, I've been here 22 years. Yes, I've seen things that are unpleasant, but was it an issue for our business development? Was it an issue for our decision to continue to remain in Paraguay, to put literally all our eggs in the Paraguayan basket? Absolutely not. But like Sheila said, now you're opening up the doors to more sophisticated people, not pirate investors or frontier investors, but you're looking for institutional investors. So that will just do mentality In Paraguay, people used to say así nomás. That's not going to work for much longer. So we obviously need to continue to formalize to combat things that don't work. Education for me, like Sheila mentioned, is an issue because now you're having projects that require serious management, and finding good CEOs, good CFOs, good CTOs, it's a big challenge. And luckily, we're next door to Brazil when there's a plethora of very qualified people that are looking for a better environment to work. So when you look, you find, but Paraguay needs to invest more in education. So that's a little bit my 2 cents. There are challenges, but for what I call a 22-year-old country, and the reason I say that is because, in my opinion, we started to rebuild institutions post-dictatorship, not in '93, but in 2002. Really, we haven't done that bad for a 23-year-old country.
Okay, that's good. Jessica, you're going to say something?
Yeah. I think really important to that goes back to my point on openness, because to your point, 95% of the best deals, pardon me, and I would say that this is not even a Paraguay issue. It's all over the region. 95% of the best deals in Latin America are owned, controlled by the families. And I think that's okay. I think that's great. I think that there's been a lot not done well in the region that justifies why that's the case. But I think to Sebastian's point, we're getting to an interesting timing where there's a saturation of that capital because the exits aren't as fast as needed to be able to recycle that capital, and partners, to include private investors like ourselves, could be that value add. Now, what we're confronting is not a challenge. I don't like to talk about challenges. I like to talk about opportunities, is to potentially change the culture and the mindset across the region. And Paraguay is included in that, in terms of, okay, we need to recapitalize. How do we recapitalize? Do we issue a bond on the local market or on an international market and hope that we can get enough to recapitalize so we can reinvest, whether it's to scale our business, to grow, to do construction on some real assets? Or do we start thinking outside the box and bringing in private equity investors that are interested partners that are in it for the quasi long term, who would want to partner with us, bring us the capital that we need, potentially bring us a new, client base, potentially get us access to other markets and other types of investors? I think that we need, the collective and the ecosystem that I mentioned earlier, have to start talking about that really honestly, to be able to come up with some solutions. Because as a private investor, I would say that's my number one issue right now, is how to knock on doors and make sure that they're opened, and that they understand that, new types of investors, new types of capital could play a really interesting role that maybe traditionally going to the market, issuing a bond or getting debt, the traditional way maybe isn't always the best go-to way.
Right. Okay.
Julio, I
Thank you.
will also
Yes.
add that we need more training, as I mentioned before, on developing projects, not only on like writing the projects, but for example, making the CAPEX, the key performance indicators. As Sebastian and also Jessica mentioned, in particular, Sebastian said, in my country, in Paraguay, is así nomás. We need to build more sophisticated projects that will, be appealing for these new kind of investors. And for this, I think the government needs a lot of training, and maybe also the private sector, because here we are used to, because of the way we are organized, as both have said before me, like in families, family groups with that have the resources, but always based in confidence. And so the confidence is the thing that triggered with whom you're going to work. But when an investor coming from abroad wants to work, they need a little bit more of information, the CAPEX, the key performance indicator, the EBITDA, and that kind of things. We are not trained to do that, not even the private sector. And this is also something that it's a challenge for for us because we
Yeah.
always work based on confidence. When a bank give money to a certain group, it's not only because the project is nice and is good, but because the family or the group is trustworthy. And this has to change because we need to work with people that we don't know and to have the arbiter that is in place in case something is not going the right way.
Thank you, Sheila. I'm conscious of time, and we're kind of I need to wrap this up just to keep to the timeline. But I do want to talk about institutional reform and about rule of law and corruption. And so I'm going to throw this back to you, Sheila. And I know this is a vast topic and it's not everybody's favorite, but um, perhaps if you could comment from the point of view of what are the steps needed to consolidate, greater trust in institutions, both domestically and internationally. In writing the report that we're going to release, we talk about the progress on anti-corruption and procurement reforms and all that, but we also mentioned the implementation gaps that have taken place. And so maybe just sort of big picture, what needs to happen. And after that, if anybody else wants to chime in, feel free.
I think we have had some successes that are important, but we still need, for example, we have created just recently a national integrity anti-corruption body, and we have to give real teeth to it. We have to tie the system to performance and money, in particular linking budget allocations, for example, for the local governments to the performance and on these issues. I think we also need, and this will create and involve the private sector and an oversight body to assess implementation of this integrity strategy. Because here in the country, and I was one of the people who made the jump from the private sector to the public, and I was the Minister of Justice, but many people just will say here in the country that have all their investment here, all their money here, they will talk about the government like something, on the other side of the road in which they are not involved. But we need to be involved. And I'm not speaking only about, for example, NGOs. I'm speaking about the private sector being much more involved in these kind of issues. Because I think we have arrived to a cap in what we can produce internally. So we need this money. And the amounts that Jessica has mentioned are the most important for us. Not those huge, but for the private sector, they will be very interesting, that kind of amounts that she mentioned. We also need to, for example, address things that have been historically very problematic, like the conflict of interest, the size of the government. We have so many people employed, and this is very important on the budget of the government. A lot of money goes to salaries. So improve that is really critical. We have to regulate lobbying, like in every other country, revolving doors. This has been something that has been in the news recently. Clean up the state-owned enterprises. Take real care about pensions. This is important also. Establish risk-based internal controls. This has been something that, while I was in the Ministry of Justice, was very important for me. And something else that worked really well in the areas that they establish is to put as many procedures online as you can, so you diminish the face-to-face petty bribes. This is important. And of course, protect and empower civil society, the press, follow the money. This is something we have been doing. Particularly because the organized crime and the corruption feed each other, and we all know that. And I always say align procurement to international standards. This is very important also. There are a lot of documents in which we can build to work and improve our procurement system. I will go
Okay. Okay.
hear
Thank you.
what they feel about this.
Yeah.
If I
Sebastian,
may,
you have comments, or Jessica? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I, I, I love hearing all of that because I think it's all very practical. I think that at the end of the day, what I've learned in my own transition from working on policy to private investor, on the journey I have been on, I have realized that I also had a learning curve where I moved from political platitudes to pragmatism. And I seek environments that are practical. I seek partners that are practical because at the end of the day, as an investor, the numbers is what matters. Um, you know, what I hear about rule of law and corruption, again, for it, no one is immune of those issues. No country is immune. Tulia, you said it. You know,
Yeah.
Paraguay is no different from any other country in the world, and for some reason investors go into those other countries. There's much capital going into India. India is
Yeah.
not perfect,
Complacency.
right? And and but I find that in Latin America, you know, I'm not here to disabuse people or demystify the concept of corruption. It exists everywhere. But I do think that unlike other parts of the world, you can still operate in Latin America. You can still invest in Latin
Yeah.
America. You can still find jurisdictions where you can engage in conflict resolution, where you can engage in arbitration, and you can find some common ground and hopefully resolve, you know, those types of jurisdictional and legal issues should something happen. I'm on a journey as a private investor with my investment fund to showcase how that can be done responsibly and well. And I think that what Paraguay is doing and what Sheila has been talking about is important. And what I have seen from Paraguay is a degree of pragmatism that I hope can be taken to other markets so that they can also learn those lessons
Okay.
quickly. Those habits are important because investors get turned off very easily, again, because Latin America is already a lot of work. So the more work you give them, the less appealing you are. And I think that Paraguay is taking all of the right steps to take away that extra homework so that they can be more willing to apply their capital.
Good stuff. Sebastian, do you have any closing comments on this topic?
No, I could not agree more with what's been said. I think, like I mentioned before, I think we're on the right path. I think every day is a little bit better than the day before. I think it's a very business-friendly environment. When you look at red tape, ease of doing business, it's not a myth, it's a reality. And because it's so small in terms of people, if you have problems, you can really easily fix the problem. You will find the people that can help you, that can explain the issue,
Yeah.
present the solution in the correct manner, and not, you know, create a problem to sell you the solution. I see that as a positive. And my closing point would be one of the reasons why nobody is paying attention to Paraguay, partly, but not only, is because it's hard to get to. We really need a direct flight between the US and Paraguay. We only have one real intercontinental flight to Madrid.
Yeah.
And that was fairly transformational when we got that flight. And I have no doubt that it will also be transformational when we get that line back with the US. You know, it's just hard to get to Paraguay. And
Yeah.
and people, for all the wrong reasons, always think nobody's going to blame me if I say I want to expand in Brazil or in Colombia, even though in a lot of cases it doesn't make sense. But when you
Yeah.
try to pitch your idea that we should go to Paraguay, and people start to say, well, how do I even go there? That's
Right.
not
Yeah.
helping. So that's a little bit on the joke side, but it's not that
Yeah.
much of a joke. I mean, you need to make it easy, like Jessica said, for investors to feel comfortable and also just to get there.
All good things. Well, this has been great, guys. I think I certainly learned a lot from hearing you, and also I'm actually very encouraged with some of the commentary. I think for the most part, it validates the view that this is an ascending story. it's a great story, and yeah, like anything else, it has kinks to iron out, but it's a good story. So I just want to bring this to a close. I want to let everybody know that if you have questions, feel free to reach out to Global Americans or myself. And of course, I want to thank our listeners and our three panelists, Sheila, Jessica, and Sebastian. Have an amazing day, everyone. Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Thank you very
So much.
much.
Ciao.
Okay, thank you very much, Tulio. It's been outstanding presentation. We have many thoughts after your speech and your reflections. I would like to make an appointment with some ideas that left our previous panel. First of all, I would like to mention the Jessica's contribution. It's especially valuable when she reminds that the objective of our project must be very realistic. The perfect is the enemy of the possible, we used to say here. We used to say here. One of the main reasons many cooperation efforts in Latin America fail is precisely what Jessica highlighted, expecting our initiative to be the largest, to deliver the greatest possible returns, and to proceed without obstacles. So that's very, very impossible, just to use one word. Beginning with feasible projects grounded in sincere and attainable goals should be one of our guiding principles in this organization, in this group. The second things I would like to say is that Paraguay is a country, and I think it was Sebastian who mentioned this, where the same strength and shortcomings found elsewhere can also be observed. Therefore, the question we have to make ourselves is honestly and openness. Why do investment continue to choose other destinations? I think it's having potential does not necessarily mean knowing how to harness it. Those who can help us better understand this are companies and individuals like Sebastian, who have chosen Paraguay not only as a place to invest, but also as their home. He came to live in Paraguay. So I think he's got many answers to how we have to do, look into the future to change our behavior and to change our institution, to strengthen our institution. The third thing is the perspective of those who have chosen Paraguay is essential for us to recognize how much the country has changed over the past 20 years, just to put a number. And to envision the future based on what still needs to be transformed. When I heard the first time in my first chat with Sebastian that he's been living in Paraguay the last 20 years, and today he's amused about how it changed the country. Well, I made a real great effort to remember how was this country 20 years ago. I was in that time I was at the Congress, serving at the Congress, and I think it's very hard for all the power for a number of Paraguayans remember how was our country in the beginning of the 2000s, and that is very, very, very impressive. How can you feel when you realize the things we have made in this way? The fourth thing I would like to say is that challenges are opportunities. I think Sheila talked about it. Strengthening the rule of law and combating corruption become far more achievable when we can share experience with partnered companies from countries such the United States. The expertise, the know-how, trade can promote the adoption of best practices, introducing corporate compliance, for example, into our business culture, and setting new goals. I think will allow us to preserve what has been achieved and to build a global reputation with a new model. I'm not talking about the ancient model of doing business here in Paraguay, who has its roots in during the dictatorships. We still have some models like that, but new companies and new culture of and new entrepreneurs will help our country to enforce new institutions, and we need a lot new institutions for development in the future. And the last but not the least, Paraguay has developed a business ecosystem that, when market demands required it, proved capable to building for example, the third largest inland waterway fleet in the world, in the hidrovia Paraguay-Paraná. The biggest is Paraguayan. So why should we not aspire to achieve similar results in other sectors? Sometimes we don't need to, and so we are in our comfort zone, and that's very important to understand what happened here in our country. Of course, none of this is easy, but as a great American president once said, we choose this objective not because it is easy, but precisely because it is hard enough to prove ourselves how are we made of, and to make it better day by day. Thank you very much for your participation, and we are very happy to receive your feedback, and until the next time.